This story is titled, I Paid $1,300 every month to help my parents, only to discover they were funding my jobless golden brother's lifestyle. Hey everyone, if you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, I sent my parents thousands, only to discover they funded my golden brother's lavish life, so I cut them off and let them sink. Growing up, I, 27 male, was that guy, the dependable one, the one who handled responsibilities without complaint, because complaining wasn't my thing. My parents had me figured out from an early age. I wasn't the golden child. That title, with all its privileges, belonged to my younger brother, 22 male. I wasn't the screw-up either, so I didn't get their constant attention or concern. No, I was the workhorse, the reliable one, the guy they knew would get things done without question. And honestly, I played my role well. If there was a chore to be done, it landed on my plate. Lawn to mow? Mr. Fence to fix? Meanwhile, my brother breezed through life. He'd spend hours on the couch gaming while I was outside sweating over some household task. And when he made a mistake, my parents would twist themselves into knots making excuses for him. I'd forget to take out the trash, and suddenly I was irresponsible. My parents weren't going to change, and my brother sure as hell wasn't going to suddenly start pulling his weight. I learned to shrug it off, focusing on working hard, doing well in school, and planning my escape from that house. And I did escape. When I landed a solid job overseas, it felt like I was finally free. For the first time, I was on my own terms. No lectures, no ridiculous expectations hanging over my head like a storm cloud. I had my own apartment, a paycheck that gave me freedom, and the ability to live my life the way I wanted. It was incredible, honestly. For the first time, I wasn't just the workhorse. I was me. But here's the thing about family. No matter how far you go, no matter how much space you put between you, they're still there. My parents weren't bad people. They had worked hard their whole lives to give my brother and me the best they could. We didn't have much growing up, but they did what they could to make sure we were taken care of. And I appreciated that. So when I got settled in my new job, I decided it was time to give back. They had sacrificed so much for us. It felt like the right thing to do. Every month, I wired $1,300 into a joint account I'd set up with my mom. It was a big chunk of my paycheck, but I didn't mind. I figured it was going toward groceries, utilities, or maybe even something extra to make their lives a little easier. My mom would occasionally message me updates about how the money was being spent, fixing the roof, paying off some medical bills, and taking care of general household stuff. It felt good knowing I could help them. I wasn't living large overseas, but I didn't need to. Knowing my parents were comfortable was enough for me. For a couple of years, everything seemed fine. My parents were always grateful, and my mom made a point to tell me how much they appreciated the help. She'd call me so often to thank me. But over time, little things started standing out. Small inconsistencies in what my mom said about the money. Unexplained withdrawals. Payments to accounts I didn't recognize. At first, I didn't think much of it. As the months went by, those inconsistencies became harder to ignore. Something wasn't adding up, and the more I looked, the more I started to question everything. It was a random Tuesday night when I first noticed something strange. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just logging into the joint account to make sure the latest transfer had gone through. It has become a routine for me. I liked knowing my parents had the money they needed. Everything seemed normal at first. My deposit was there, the balance looked right, but then, scrolling through the recent transactions, something caught my eye. A $50 transfer to an account I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it might have been some utility payment or a one-off expense. My mom hadn't mentioned anything about it, but I figured she'd forgotten. It was only $50, right? Not exactly a red flag. I didn't give it much thought, but then it happened again. The next month, $100 disappeared to the same account. This time, it stuck in my head a little longer. I remember staring at the screen, trying to connect the dots. Was this a subscription they'd forgotten to mention? A small debt they were paying off? Still, I let it go. Life was busy, and I figured there had to be a reasonable explanation. The third month was the tipping point. It wasn't just $50 or $100 anymore. It was $200. I couldn't ignore it any longer. These transfers weren't random. They were consistent, deliberate, and always to the same mystery account. I decided to confront my mom. Casually, of course. I didn't want to come across as paranoid or accusatory. "Hey, Mom," I said during one of our weekly calls. "I noticed a couple of smaller transfers in the account. What's that for? Is everything okay?" Her answer came quickly, almost too quickly. Oh, just some unexpected expenses, she said, her tone light and nonchalant. What kind of expenses? I pressed, keeping my voice steady. You know, groceries, little repairs here and there, she replied. Nothing special. Still, I didn't push it. I wanted to believe her. She was my mom, after all. If she said it was nothing, maybe it really was nothing. Over the next few weeks, I started paying more attention to the account. Every time I logged in, there it was. Another transfer. Another chunk of my money disappearing. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $300, but it was always the same account. $300 gone, just like that. I remember staring at the transaction and thinking, that wasn't groceries or little repair. That was a lot of money, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I decided to call her again, but this time I wasn't going to let her brush me off. Mom, I said, cutting straight to the point, I've been seeing these transfers in the account every month. It's always to the same place. What's going on? There was a long pause. Too long. Then she finally said, Oh, it's nothing to worry about. Just a few things your dad needed. What kind of things? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm even though my patience was fraying. She replied, Why do you keep asking how we spent the money? You are treating us like children. I told her. It's not that I don't want to help. I just want to understand where the money's going. It's not about trust. It's about transparency. She sighed, her voice softening. Maybe we can sit down and talk about it when you come home to visit. That was the moment I knew she wasn't going to tell me the truth. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't what I was sending the money for. I'd worked hard to put myself in a position where I could help my family, and I didn't like the idea of my money being misused. I decided to take matters into my own hands. If my mom wasn't going to give me answers, I'll let her speak on her own. The following month, I decided to test the waters. Instead of sending the usual $1,300, I sent $1,000. I didn't tell my mom in advance. I wanted to see how she'd react. When she called me a few days later, I could hear the disappointment in her voice. I noticed the transfer was a little short this month, she said. Yeah, I replied casually. I figured since everything seemed to be covered, you didn't need as much. Oh, okay, she said after a long pause. We'll make do. She didn't argue, but something about the conversation left me unsettled. If the money wasn't a big deal, why did she sound so uneasy? A few days later, my brother called me. The guy never called. I almost didn't answer because I assumed he wanted something. And I was right. Why'd you cut back on the money? He demanded the second I picked up. What the hell are you talking about? I asked, caught off guard. Mom says you're sending less now and asking about every penny. What's your problem? My problem is that I'm sending money to help mom and dad, not to fund some mystery account, I shouted. It's family money, he said, his tone dripping with entitlement. Why are you acting like it's all yours? Because I'm the one earning it, I shot back. If you need something, why don't you talk to me directly instead of sneaking it out of the account? He scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and hung up. That call put the puzzle pieces together with what? It was something I didn't expect. This wasn't about unexpected expenses. My brother was somehow involved, and I was going to find out exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. After that call with my brother, I couldn't focus on anything else. His smug tone, his fucking voice, it all gnawed at me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, the sacrifices I'd made to help my family. And now, it seemed like they were keeping something from me. I felt betrayed. I decided it was time to dig deeper. I logged into the joint account again, scrolling through the transactions with fresh eyes. Every single transfer to that unknown account stood out like a neon sign now. It wasn't just one or two, it was dozens, spread out over months. The amounts varied, but they were always there, slipping away little by little. My head was spinning as I added them up. In less than a year, nearly $5,000 had disappeared into that account. $5,000. That wasn't some unexpected expense or random bill. That was deliberate, calculated. I knew I had to confront my mom, but I wanted to give her one last chance to come clean. Maybe she'd been put in a tough spot. Maybe there was a reason for all of this, and I was just jumping to conclusions. So, during our next call, I approached it as calmly as I could. Hey, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been going through the account again, and I noticed those transfers are still happening. They're adding up, you know? There was a long pause. Too long. Then, finally, she said again, Oh, honey, it's nothing to worry about. Just a few things we've needed. My patience snapped. Mom, $5,000 isn't just a few things. That's a lot of money. And you still haven't told me what it's for. I deserve to know. Her voice wavered. It's for your brother, she confessed, almost in a whisper. Yeah, sure it was for that a-hole. I answered, For my brother? For what? I demanded, my voice sharper now. He's been struggling, she said quickly, like she was trying to get the words out before I could interrupt. Struggling with what exactly? I asked, barely keeping my anger in check. He lives at home rent-free. He has no bills, no job, and he gets a scholarship that even gives him spending money. What could he possibly need $5,000 for? She hesitated. At that moment, I knew she didn't have a good answer. It's just, he needs help, she said weakly. I snapped. Help with what, Mom? I shouted, my frustration boiling over. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie to me about it? Mom, do you know what I've given up to send you that money? I've skipped vacations, lived on a tight budget, and worked my ass off so you and Dad could have some breathing room. And all this time, you've been funneling it to him? She started crying, but I couldn't bring myself to feel bad. This wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal. Does Dad know about this? I asked, my voice cold. She didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. My dad was probably in the dark, just like I had been. I hung up the phone. I couldn't even think straight. $5,000, gone. And for what? For my brother getting drunk with his friends? His entitlement? I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into my brother's social media accounts. His profiles weren't private. He'd always loved showing off, but I'd stopped paying attention to his posts ages ago. Now I scrolled through them with a new perspective. What I found made my blood boil. Photos of him out at expensive clubs, surrounded by friends, holding bottles of champagne. A post showing off a brand new pair of sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Pictures of gadgets, gaming setups, and even a shiny new car parked in our parents' driveway. The captions were the worst. Work hard, play harder. Living the dream. Grateful for my blessings. Grateful. Well, the guy had never worked a day in his life. I kept scrolling down. I found a post of him showing off the car. I'd never heard my parents mention buying a car, let alone one for him. My mom didn't even drive. So where did it come from? My own money. He was using my money to fund this lifestyle. All those transfers, all those vague excuses. They were bankrolling his nights out, his sneakers, his gadgets, and that damn car. I couldn't sit on this any longer. I called him immediately. Enjoying the car, huh? I asked the moment he picked up. Imagining him standing in front of me, I'd have smashed him in the face. There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know where my money's been going, I said coldly. How long did you think you could keep this up? Dude, relax, he said, his tone shifting from nervous to defensive. It's not a big deal. It's family money. Family money? I spat. It's my money. I worked for it. I sent it to help Mom and Dad, not so you could buy sneakers and pop bottles. He sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. Look, I don't know why you're so mad. You're making good money, right? It's not like you're broke. That was it. That was the moment I realized he didn't just feel entitled to my money. He genuinely believed he deserved it. I was so angry I could barely speak. You're right, I said finally. I will make more. But you? Done. I hung up before he could respond. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After that call, I couldn't sit still. The idea of how my brother grinning like he'd earned the right to live like a king suffocated me. He's surrounded by people who probably had no idea his entire lifestyle was funded by someone else's hard work, by my hard work. And even my parents used me for his comfort. But anger wasn't enough. I needed proof, something solid to confront not just him, but my parents. I wasn't going to let them twist this into something it wasn't. If I was going to blow this up, I was going to make damn sure they couldn't get away with what they did. I checked the transactions in the joint account again. The $50 transfers had been the start. Then $100. Then $300. By the time I finished adding it all up, the total had grown to over $5,000. And that was just what I could trace. The car still didn't make sense, though. Even with all the money siphoned from me, I couldn't figure out how they'd managed to afford it. So I did something I hadn't done since leaving home. I called one of my old friends from the neighborhood. Hey, I said, keeping my tone casual. You still see my family around? Yeah, he replied. Your mom's at the grocery store all the time, and your brother, well, he's kind of hard to miss with that car. That was my opening. Yeah, about that car, I said, trying to sound uninterested. What's the deal with it? Oh man, you didn't know? He asked, sounding surprised. It's all he talks about. He tells everyone your parents co-signed for it, and he's been using their money to make the payments. Terrible. My parents didn't even own a car. How could they justify signing for one when they couldn't afford it? Thanks for the heads up, I said, hanging up before he could ask questions. I was done playing nice. If my brother wanted to live large on my dime, he was going to learn what happens when the free ride ends. The first step was shutting down the joint account. I transferred the remaining balance to my personal account and canceled all future deposits. Then I started making calls. First, the bank. Since my mom had co-signed for the car using funds I'd sent, I had some leverage. Legally, the car was tied to the account I'd been funding. After a long, tense conversation with the bank, I managed to get the car repossessed. If my brother wanted a car, he could buy one with his own money, not mine. Then I reached out to his university. I compiled a neat little folder of his Instagram posts, the car, the parties, the gadgets, and sent it to their scholarship committee. I explained how he'd been using his scholarship stipend and additional unreported income to fund a lifestyle that didn't align with their academic integrity standards. Within a week, his scholarship was revoked. You think I was done? Absolutely not. I remembered something my mom had let slip years ago. My brother had been selling sneakers on the side. Back then, I didn't think much of it, but now was the missing piece. I dug a little deeper and found out he hadn't reported any of that income. A quick, anonymous tip to the IRS, and I knew he'd be dealing with an audit soon enough. Then the drama started. The first call was from my mom. "The car's gone!" she cried. "They repossessed it. What did you do?" "I took back what's mine," I said flatly. "You co-signed for that car with money I earned, and you lied to me about it. This is on you." She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. "You made your choice when you funneled thousands of dollars to him behind my back. Don't expect me to bail you out now?" The next call came from my brother. I was waiting for it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted the moment I picked up. "What's wrong with me?" I replied, my voice cold. "What's wrong with you? You've been stealing from me for years and acting like you're some kind of self-made success. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? You ruined my life!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "The car's gone, I lost my scholarship, and the IRS is after me. What am I supposed to do now?" "Get a job," I said simply. "Maybe then you'll understand what it feels like to actually work for something. You're such a—" I hung up before he could finish. I didn't care what names he wanted to call me. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. This was about teaching him, and my parents, that actions have consequences, and that they cannot play with me and think I won't catch them. Without my financial support, my parents quickly fell behind on bills. They called me, begging for help, but I stood firm. "Ask your golden child," I said coldly. "Oh wait, he's broke now, isn't he?" They ended up having to sell the house and move into a small apartment. My brother, meanwhile, started working part-time at a fast food joint, just to keep himself afloat. He tried selling off his sneaker collection to cover some of his debts, but even that wasn't enough to dig him out of the hole he'd created. Nothing beats the feeling of keeping my money, my peace of mind, and finally putting some distance between myself and their endless drama. I don't know if my brother will ever truly understand what he did wrong, but that's not my problem anymore. Update 1 point. Hi people. It's been a hot week, but I figured it's time for an update. Get ready because a lot has happened since I last posted. Cutting my family off financially was probably the scariest decision I've ever made. But honestly, best decision ever. When I stopped sending them $1,300 a month, it was chaos at first. My mom blew up my phone with voicemails that were all over the place. 1 minute she's crying, the next she's yelling, "How could you do this to us? We're your family." And my brother? Ghosted. Completely silent. Classic him. But once the initial guilt trip storm passed, something amazing happened. I felt free. Like, really free for the first time in forever. No more stressing about where my paycheck was disappearing to. No more wondering if my hard-earned money was funding my brother's pizza and gaming marathons. It was just mine. With that extra cash, I finally started putting myself first. I built up a solid emergency fund. Seriously, why didn't I do this sooner? And then I did something I've been dreaming about for years. I booked a freaking vacation. A week on a sunny beach, sipping cocktails, no family drama weighing me down. Absolute bliss. And get this, I've even started investing. Turns out, when you're not constantly bailing out your family, your money can actually grow. Who knew? I'm still learning the ropes, but watching my savings grow instead of shrink? Chef's kiss. Meanwhile, things at home? Not so rosy. My family was learning the hard way what life's like without their human ATM. My mom and dad stopped calling as much. Guess I wasn't as fun to talk to once the money dried up. And my brother? Still ghosting. Honestly, though, their drama's not my problem anymore. And for the first time, I'm totally okay with that. Final update. Dot. Hey everyone, I didn't plan to post another update, but here I am. Alright, so here's the part I still can't believe happened. A few weeks ago, my phone buzzes. It's my brother. The brother. The one who took my money and acted like I owed it to him. Hey, he says. And right away, I could tell something was off. He didn't sound like his usual smug self. He sounded, I don't know, tired? Be even embarrassed? What do you want? I asked, not even trying to hide my skepticism. And then he drops it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I almost dropped the phone. Like, what? Who is this guy and what has he done with my brother? I know I screwed up, he continued. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm trying to fix things. I wanted you to know that. I didn't know what to say. Seriously, I was stunned. For so long, I'd been angry, furious, actually, at how he'd treated me. I never thought he'd own up to it, let alone apologize. Finally, I just said, good, you've got a lot to fix. And that was it. We didn't talk much after that, and honestly, I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I mean, it's a start, but am I ready to forgive him? Not even close. For now, I'm focusing on me. I've spent enough time being the family workhorse, cleaning up after everyone else. It's my turn to live my life without all that weight on my shoulders. As for my brother, that's his mess to sort out. Whether he fixes things or not, it's not my responsibility anymore. And let me tell you, that feels pretty damn good. Tell me what y'all think.